Hi, everybody. So today I'm going to discuss Ida B and her plans to maximize fun, avoid disaster, and possibly save the world. So this week you are reading this selection from our literature anthology, and your writing prompt is asking you to compare and contrast Ida B at the beginning of the story and at the end. What experiences helped change the way Ida B saw herself and the world around her? So when I assigned this selection for you to read or listen to, I also asked you to take some notes comparing and contrasting what you learned about Ida B and the experiences that she had throughout the story. So here I have a Venn diagram, and I've broken it up into some categories. This is where we're going to compare and contrast. So first we're going to think about what Ida B is like at school versus at home. And then we're also going to think about the main portion of the story where really the changing occurs. And so what is she like on an ordinary day versus today? So I hope you enjoyed this story. I like Ida B as a character because it's really interesting to kind of learn about what was going on with her in her life and what was happening with her mom. I think when the story first starts out, we learn a lot about her mom having cancer and going through that ordeal, and Ida B's favorite place in the world are the apple trees and the apple orchards, and the fact that they had to cut some of those, I think they had to cut them down or sell them in order to be able to pay for medical experiences. And, we also learned that at first Ida B is homeschooled. She's able to stay home and be taught at home, but once her mom gets sick, she then has to go to public school. And going to public school really changes her perspective. I think when we first meet Ida B and she's at school, she is like sarcastic. She's not very impressed by the classmates around her. She gets this impression that her classmates kind of suck up to the teacher, as opposed to being genuine and real. And we know at home, which used to be her happy place, she's kind of unhappy and sad. Okay, so we also know that at school, I should back up. We learned something big about Ida B. Okay, that whether she's at school or she's at home, there's something that she really likes to do. Ida B likes reading. And this is kind of going to be our focus as we continue to fill out at school and at home. And then when we start looking at what does an ordinary day look like, and then what does today look like. So taking this idea of that she likes reading, as you were reading the story, I hope you picked up on the fact that at school, even though she might like to read to herself and read silently, she does not want to read aloud. She doesn't like it. So we learn that she feels nervous about reading aloud. And if we compare that to how she feels at home when it comes to reading, we learned that she loves reading aloud in her room where it's private and no one hears her. And I think some of us can identify with that. There are things we do when it's just us and we're much more comfortable than when we are in our classroom around our classmates, because there's always that fear of, am I going to mess up? Is someone going to laugh? What's going to happen? So if we start with just at school and at home, at school, Ida B is sarcastic. She has these thoughts about her classmates and doesn't really view them as being genuine people. She feels nervous about reading aloud. We know that at home she's unhappy and sad because of what's going on with her family life. But we also know that she loves reading aloud in her room. And then this was our main connector right here. So we're really looking at this, this, and this. So then some things happen in the story, and Ida B is asked by her teacher to read aloud. And so we know that at first, on any ordinary day when she goes to school, Ida feels unhappy. The author writes and says, there is no joy floating inside her. And I love that sentence because this author uses a lot of figurative language to really show how Ida B feels, and it really signals the change in her. So she feels unhappy, and I'm going to use this example. There is no joy. Well, I don't think it had quotations. There is no joy floating inside of her. Okay, so we know that this is how she's feeling. The teacher asks her to read because she's read the story before, and so this kind of changes her perspective. Okay, and so she's feeling unhappy. We know that every day she goes home after school. And we're going to kind of compare and contrast what happens after she goes home after school. So on an ordinary day, she feels unhappy. There's no joy floating inside of her. Today, she feels happy, warm, and bright. And these words right here signal a change. And I hope you can see that. At first, there's no joy floating inside of her. Today, she feels happy, warm, and bright. So when you go to write your paragraph, which is why we're talking about this right now, these are actually pieces of text evidence that you can think about and you can use in those text evidence sentences, because this does show a change in her. We know that, she feels unhappy, and then this sentence supports that she is unhappy. We know that on this particular day, she feels happy. And the fact that she is warm and bright supports that statement that she feels happy. Now, there's just one more thing. Ida B, every day after she goes home from school, she does something else, and I'm going to have to make a little arrow. She eats dinner with her parents. Okay, so every day she eats dinner with her parents, and on an ordinary day, we learn that she doesn't talk at dinner. And if you think about it, if you were super unhappy, would you have anything to talk about? So she doesn't talk at dinner. But on this day, today, she's so happy that she has to talk. Okay, so again, if we're really looking at Ida B, we can see through comparing and contrasting that she has changed. And this week's compare and contrast skill, or comprehension skill, was comparing and contrasting setting. And what I mean by that is not saying setting 1 is a school, setting 2 is a home, or vice versa, but kind of looking at how does she change within these settings. So she changes at school. She goes from being sarcastic and feeling nervous, being unhappy, to being happy. At home, she goes from being unhappy and sad to feeling happy and wanting to talk. Okay? So I hope you can use some of these notes to help you with your writing. Everyone will get a copy in Google Classroom that looks like this. So this is going to be what you write your paragraph on. So up at the top, there's the writing prompt. And then right here, I wrote down, or I typed out the paragraph structure, and I gave you sentence starters. So if you look, paragraph structure, we start our paragraph with a topic sentence that restates the prompt. Here's an example of a topic sentence. Experiences at school and home helped change the way Ida B saw herself and the world around her. Then your next sentence is your first example of how Ida B changed using a transition at first, because that shows that she was different. She was like something in the beginning, okay? You could even use in the beginning. That's a good one too. In the beginning of the story. But we need a transition that shows that we're signaling that this is how she was. Okay, then you're going to have your next sentence is text evidence supporting your first example. The text states, according to the text on page blank, I read that. Okay, then you have sentence 4. What does the text mean? So this shows, what does it show you? Okay, how she changed. Then you give your second example of how Ida B changed using a transition. Another way Ida B changed, or at the end of the story. So see how these two go together? At first, another way, in the beginning, at the end. Then you have text evidence supporting your second example using one of those correct citations. And I put a note, choose a different way to state text evidence than in first example. So if you used the text states in the first example, then the second example, you need to use something different. Oh, and I spelled example wrong. And then what does the text evidence mean? So again, this shows. Okay. Finally, you're going to wrap up your paragraph with a concluding sentence. In conclusion, Ida B's experiences at home and at school helped to change her perspective. I used a new word, perspective. Okay. So you don't have to use the topic sentence and the concluding sentence. Those are just sentences to make you think. You may use those if you cannot come up with something on your own. Now, it says write your paragraph below. Remember to use correct spelling and grammar. So you're just going to begin typing right here. Okay, so make sure you're paying attention to those rules of typing. If you were writing it by hand, what would I expect to see? It's the same thing I expect to see if you were typing as well. So each of you will get one of these. It won't have in the beginning of the story or at the end of the story because those came from the notes, but definitely you're more than welcome to use those. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock, I will have a language arts help meeting. So if you need some help on your writing, if you need help with Scholastic News, sign on to that meeting at 2 o'clock. Otherwise, when these are due on Monday, I will read them, I will make comments, and I will give feedback to help improve your writing for next week. Okay, so thanks so much for listening and good luck on this assignment.